Can you really live overseas for $500 USD a month? Well, that's my first ever clickbaity video title. Let's see how it works out for me. For those of you that like to just click on the video and run away, the quick answer is yes, maybe. Well, it kind of depends. And if you want to know what I mean by that, sorry, you got to watch the rest of the video. Hi, I'm Adam Marsland, back for episode 3 of Expat Curious. Before we get started, let's give you a little scenery. It's a rainy day here in Southeast Asia, but that's what's behind me. Unfortunately, the lighting won't let me. You can have me or that, so we can we can sort of negotiate as we go along. So back to this focus. It's magic. First of all, I want to apologize for those of you that started watching the show and then had to wait a month or so for another episode. I did promise they were going to come a little more rapidly. A couple of things happened. One was that I was on the road filming for the Legacy show on this channel. Adam Walks Around, and so I was traveling a lot. Second reason was this channel started out as a music video channel. We still do them sometimes, and one of the videos blew up, so that kind of took over everything for a couple of weeks. And the third was I wanted to do a little background research on the topic for this week's show, because most of my experience is limited to here in Southeast Asia. Not all of you are going to be interested in coming here. In fact, probably a lot of you are looking at Eastern Europe, South America, maybe other places like that. And I wanted to get a little better informed. So I've started signing up for some expat boards on Reddit and on Facebook that I wasn't already on, just to gather a little more perspective. And it's actually been really rewarding. I've learned a lot, and I think I'll be able to better digest that information and pass it on to you. And I want to especially call out the Facebook expat groups for the Philippines, Poland, Italy, and Mexico, and also the Reddit subreddit Our Expat and Our Expats for giving me some great feedback, especially the Mexico board and the Philippines board. So anyway, the first episode we kind of talked about having the courage to make a change in your life. The second was sort of a continuation of that, of getting mentally prepared for the kinds of challenges you're going to face just in your home culture when you decide to make a change. And remember, this show is also geared to people who may never leave the country, but just want to make a substantial and formative change in their lives. And so as we go along with this series, I'm going to try to have this duality where I give you practical information, but also stuff that you can use as a philosophical insight to make changes closer to home if you decide not to make the move. Probably the most asked question I've had about the expat life is, how do you finance it? People have a lot of trouble visualizing how different cost of living questions are outside of their home country, especially Americans, where we've basically internalized the idea that everything's got to cost a ton of money. Once I start sending you down the road of how much different cost of living calculations are once you leave the West, it's going to clue you into new possibilities in your life, which is always the thing in this show. I want you to think about the possibility that the way your life is right now, the things around you, everything that you experience as reality, that's fungible. It's subject to change. You know, might get in different circumstances, and there will be different possibilities. So that's the philosophical part of it. And the practical part of it is you're thinking, well, I could never afford this. Once we get into this topic, and we're going to spend 2 or 3 episodes talking about it, you're going to see that living outside of some of these Western countries, especially the United States, can be vastly cheaper once you've accounted for a few issues. The question of how much does it cost to live overseas, virtually everybody who responded to this made the same point. It's like asking how long is a ball of string. Your lifestyle is going to be the number one issue, and we're going to dive into this a lot deeper in the next episode, which is going to be called How Local Can You Go? Frankly, $500 a month for a lot of my friends here in Asia is an enormous amount of money. I know that's hard to credit, but I know many, many people who live on half of that. You're probably wondering, how is this possible? Because you're thinking, well, I went to Bali or I went to Thailand and it cost me $2,000 for 2 weeks. It's, yeah, because you're a tourist. And a tourist is going to pay tourist prices. You're not going to know the infrastructure. And also, this is something you're not thinking about, you're there to be a tourist. So you're there to not work, not have anything to do, but go around and spend your money and do things and go places. That's expensive. You're not doing that in your everyday life when you're home. So you, at a certain point, stop being a tourist and start living your everyday life here, and you start getting the economies that come with living your everyday life. And then once you start seeing the separate infrastructure that exists for people with less means than either foreigners or high-class locals. When I say high class, I mean income class, not that they're really cool people or anything like that. But when you start seeing where people buy their food, you start seeing how they eat, you start seeing how they get around, you'll gradually start to stair step down into cheaper stuff. You're not going to be able to hit your destination and just start living on nothing right away. It's going to be a slow process. But basically, the longer you stay in a country, generally, the more economical you're going to be. You're going to start figuring out how to save money in all manner of ways. To get to this $500 a day teaser, clickbaity title, I'm going to give you a personal entry to this, something that is tangible and real, which is my own situation. If you watch the Adam Walks Around show that's going to start coming out, start coming out next month, you'll see that I had some work lined up out of the country that sort of fell through, partly because of the Omicron deal. And I was out of position because I was trying to transition to another country, and I'd already packed up my stuff in my old place. So suddenly now I'm looking at 2, 3, 4 months cooling my heels without much money coming in. So I had to think about what to do in that situation, and I picked out a place. I'm being a little vague about where I am right now for various reasons, but I am in Southeast Asia. I'm in a rural area, but one that looks like, there we go, looks like that. But it's near to the coast, and it's also near to enough Western amenities that I can still get what Westerners would consider heart-healthy food, stuff specific to foreigners. So I haven't completely gone local. I worked up a list of what I'm spending right now, my actual budget, and it goes a little something like this. For rent, and this is a studio apartment, I'll show you some film of that in a minute. For rent, a studio apartment including electricity and Wi-Fi and a built-in kitchen, hot water, not a given over here, by the way. I'm paying 187 American dollars a month. I'm carrying a kind of a luxurious cost. I'm still paying for my American phone for reasons relating to personal security, stuff like that. So that cost me $66 a month. I've got currently still carrying digital nomad insurance instead of home country insurance because I don't know yet where I'm going to be domiciled. So that's $106 every 28 days. We'll call that $106 a month. Various subscriptions to internet things, like if you're like, you might patronize this channel as a Patreon subscriber. I do that for some other channels and some other infrastructural things. That's $33 a month. Hair, we talked about that last time. I got that dyed. It's $12 here. I get a massage about every 4 or 5 days. Runs about $13 including tip. Believe it or not, another great thing about being over here. So that's $91. Laundry is $25 roughly a month. For food, and I want to stress the food is not your El Cheapo stuff. I'm actually eating at a fairly pricey health food place, and so I'm not just eating at the local taco stand or something. That's only about $15 a day right now, how it's running for me. So that's $450 for a regular month. Miscellaneous groceries, toilet paper, things like that. That's $30 a month. Also, something I didn't put on here is internet, and that's about $5 a month. And that adds up to just about exactly $1,000 a month. Not too shabby by American standards. Now, this is, of the 3.5 years I've been doing this is the cheapest month I've ever had. And generally, I was living more in the city. I was having more of an active social life, going out and drinking a little bit more, hanging out with friends, things like that. When I was in Bali, between $1,200 and $1,600 a month is about where I wound up. And in Cambodia, it was a little cheaper, $1,200 to $1,400, something like that. And then in the Philippines, especially when I was living in the city, where they don't really have Western level short-term accommodations like they do in Cambodia and Bali, it's quite a bit more expensive, especially in Manila, because you're hanging out and doing that Manila thing, a little more nightlife, more things to do, more expensive food, things like that. That was costing me almost $2,000 a month, so that was a fairly pricey deal. And in fact, it was the expats in the Philippines who laughed the hardest at the $500 a month figure, saying it was impossible, although even there, a couple of people said, no, it is not. It's what I'm paying right now. But I can tell you right now, even though I'm living pretty simply and not doing anything too terribly exciting, I'm not wanting for anything. I mean, I've got great hiking here. My diet's fantastic. There's nice people around here. I keep busy at home, making videos and stuff like that. And $1,000 a month, it's you can't. That ain't bad. But could I live on $500 a month? That's a little trickier. Let's refocus. There we are again. See, I'm kind of keeping the focus thing moving around, so you don't get tired of one focus setting. So if you held a gun to my head and said, live for $500 a month in, for example, Bali. Okay, so this is where I would start. Okay, so rent, I know for a fact because a friend of mine just did apartment shopping in Denpasar, Bali. There are places available with air conditioning and hot and cold running water, and all the things you need. Reasonable security for about what's called 1 juta, 1 million rupiah. That's about $75 American. You add in the electricity, which is not included in that situation. So that's $100 a month for electricity. For the phone, I've been really lazy about this, but I could get my American calls forwarded through a service and do all the things I'm doing right now. I've just been reluctant to do that, but if I did it, I could get that down to $25 a month. Insurance, I could just drop it completely. That would technically be a violation of my visa, but this is just a hypothetical, and no one would be checking, at least not until I got my visa renewed. Internet subscriptions, the only one I really need is the hosting service for my record label. So $20 a month for that. Hair, let it go white again, cut it once a month, $3. Massage, no massages, bummer. Laundry, hand wash. So that leaves, if I got my math right, $352, $11.70 a day for everything else, food, and groceries, internet. Could I do it? Yeah. Absolutely. If you go to the local markets in Bali, you can get a solid meal for $3. If you want to cook, if you don't want to gather in all that salt and stuff like that, you could go to the store, do your own cooking. The locals, basically, if you gave them that much money to live on for a month and just said that's just your grocery money, they'd be delighted. So yeah, you could absolutely live on $500 a month if you were willing to toss out a bunch of stuff. Now, one thing I have left out of these calculations is really, really important, is your annual visa costs. Now, you got to stay right with the government, or you might run into some trouble. There are a lot of illegal expat immigrants around the world, just like there are in the United States and other Western countries. I can only speak for Indonesia, the country I have the second most experience with. You don't want to do that here. You really do not. So for me, my annual visa costs are about $800 a year, prorated per month. That'd be about $67 a month. I also do have some internet hosting costs that run me a couple hundred a year, so that'd be another $20 or so a month. So I am fudging the numbers a little bit, but $500 a month, not impossible. Now, before I get into this topic further, I want to stress this is going to completely depend on the country that you pick out. And the place that you want to go is got to fit you, and we're going to get into this whole topic as well later. But there's a really cool website called numbeo.com, and I'll put the link in the comments, but it gives you comparative prices for the cost of living for just about anywhere in the world you could go. And this is a really great tool for you to kind of see, well, I want to go live in the south of France. Can you afford it? No. Okay, well, can I live in Spain? Maybe yes. But you right away you'll get a thumbnail idea of, what costs $500 here, costs $800 here, and whatnot. And each country is going to have sort of different pluses and minuses. Like, for instance, the Philippines is really expensive, but they have doctors that speak English, and they do have a first world health care infrastructure in the big cities, not in the rural areas, but they do, and they have a really cheap health insurance plan that anybody can sign up for, even expats. So and they also, for veterans, have a VA hospital, if I recall correctly. So this is why, for a certain subset of people, even though it is a higher cost of living, the Philippines is a really good deal. So this is one of these things that you want to be thinking about. Another thing that's going to be really important is to have a certain amount of money for emergencies. Everyone's going to need this. And the number that gets batted around the most, and I think it's a pretty good number, is $20,000. So before you make the move, I would focus on building up your finances a bit. So that could be your first goal. But in terms of ballparking the idea, you're not going to need $3,000 a month. You may not even need $2,000 a month. So if you're thinking in terms of an American retirement and the impossibility of that and all the things you've got to provide for, and if that's coloring your thinking about whether or not you can do this, well, throw it out, because the American standard of living is a unique bird, and it doesn't apply everywhere, and this is one of the reasons a lot of people are thinking about moving overseas. Now, before I get into why you don't want to live on $500 a month, I want to read this. A guy named Greg Frazier, and he's on the Philippines, the Expats in the Philippines board, and he's talking about the Philippines, which, as I said, is a bit more expensive than, say, Indonesia or Cambodia. So these numbers are actually a little high relative to those countries, but it's a good rule of thumb. He says $1,000 or less. This budget is basically just surviving. Expats that only have this amount are usually living in the provinces and are not eating a predominantly Western diet and live in Filipino-style accommodation. $1,500 to $2,000. This is probably the sweet spot for most expats. This budget allows you to buy good food, live in basic Western-style accommodations, and be able to afford basic medical costs. $2,000 plus, with this you can live very well. And basically, I think if you want to boil this down to just rough generic figures and how long is that piece of string, that's a pretty good synopsis. For me, the sweet spot is $1,500, $1,600 a month. That is about what I would need on the average to live the kind of lifestyle that I like in the places that I like to be. But as you can see, I can live pretty well for a lot less. But for $500 a month, I have made a list of reasons why you don't want to do that. And this is very important, because some of you tuned into this show hoping that I would answer yes to this question, and I have. But the point of this is to get those of you that are thinking like there's no way you could possibly afford this, to make you realize that you very probably can. However, if you're counting on living on $500 a month, at least when you first get here, I wouldn't bank on that. And so here are my top 5 reasons to not live on $500 a month. The first and the biggest one is the quality of food. Now, I just talked about if I ate local all the time, I could easily meet that food budget. I have tried this, and I can do it, but because of the high salt and sugar content, it is very poor for my health, and there actually are a fairly large number of middle-aged to elderly expats who have local wives, they live local, and they tend to stroke out or have heart attacks quite often from a lot of it's poor diet. And it's hard to escape because the local people are eating generally a lot of salt and a lot of sugar, a lot of spices. They're not necessarily going to be, being all that heart healthy. And I recently discovered this when I was in Eastern Java, and I was trying to find stuff that was okay for my diet. And the food was delicious, but it wasn't good for my own stuff. If you can cook, you're going to do a little bit better. But on the other hand, if you're living this cheap, eating out is going to be one of your few places to make any kind of social connections at all, which is what I don't like about cooking for myself, because I like to meet people. I like to hang out, and when I go out to eat, I talk to other people there. I talk to the people that work there. It's a fun time. The second big one is healthcare. Remember, I said to make that number, I'd have to drop my health insurance. That's not as deadly as it would be in America, but it's not good. Healthcare costs In Indonesia, Philippines, easily 10% of the U.S. I don't mean 10% less. I mean they are 10% of what you pay in the U.S. So for most things you get insured for in the U.S., you could drop your insurance completely, just go pay out of pocket, and you'd be money way ahead in general. So you're probably okay over here if you just have some kind of catastrophic plan, but you're going to want to have that and some kind of an airlift thing in case things really go badly for you. It's never a good idea to have no insurance at all. But the other thing about that is you can have no budget for health maintenance, dental work or something, some kind of minor infection, anything like that. I mean, a lot of my local friends, they're missing teeth. You know, some really, really beautiful women with half their teeth gone. Why is that? Because if they get a toothache, it's just a lot cheaper to pull the damn thing than to get the tooth filled. And it's just a very common practice to pull teeth. If you're going to be living on this level, you're going to see a shortened life expectancy and probably a lot of minor little annoying health issues because you are living local and the locals have to deal with this stuff because they're poor, you know, sad as it is to say. The next reason is generally life over here is pretty cheap, but if you get into trouble, you're going to really wish you had some money to buy your way out of it because as an expat, you have limited to no rights. You are a guest in the country. If your country is at all corrupt, if the legal system isn't perfect, and let's face it, in our countries the legal system isn't perfect. If you get into an accident where there's some kind of question of who's at fault, or sometimes they're going to blame you anyway because you're a foreigner, all kinds of stuff like that, your only recourse a lot of the time, unless you know the right people and you've been here for a while, is to pay your way out of it. So things can snowball real quick. Now, I've never had to do this, thank God, but you don't want to be in a situation where you don't have any extra money to get yourself out of a jam because your wallet and your ability to flee are really your only sort of backstops against a bad disaster. And if you don't have any money in the bank, that's going to suck for you. Number 4, this is one you might not think about, but stingy foreigners are not welcome, really, not really desired in a lot of countries. In fact, as things reboot from COVID, there is a move in more and more countries to start prioritizing, I don't know the word they use for it, but basically rich people. People that the governments think is going to add the most money to their coffers. And a lot of us are critical of this because it's the low to middle income tourists that tend to put the most money into local economies from our observations. Backpackers get a bad rap, but they put a lot of money into cheap restaurants, cheap housing, cheap transportation. And you get a lot of them in here, they can really move a lot of money around the culture. But basically, you're not helping anybody. And one of the nice things about living here, especially coming over to Bali when they were dead from tourism and there were hardly any people here, it was a zero-sum situation where every penny that I spent here was keeping somebody alive, quite literally. When I went out to eat or when I got a massage or when I hired somebody to take me somewhere, they put food on the table where they wouldn't have otherwise put food on the table. That's a pretty good feeling, and it's also going to contribute greatly to how the local people feel about you. You don't want to be a spendthrift. You don't want to blow money left and right because then you're going to be a mark, and you don't want that. But if you're penny pinching every little thing and trying to live on a local level, you're not necessarily going to piss them off because they do get it because that's how they live, and they'll appreciate that you're frugal and you're trying to economize. They'll understand what you're doing, but you're not really contributing to your adopted environment. So it's kind of not cool to live that cheap, is what I'm saying. And then the last one, and it's probably maybe even the most important, it's if you live on $500 a month, most cases it's really boring. You're not going to be able to do very much. You're not going to be able to eat out. You're not going to travel at all. You're not really going to leave your room. You're not probably going to be able to date, if that's important to you. One of the big things that drives up your expenses over here is if you've got a girlfriend or you're supporting your wife's family or anything like that. Even just casual dating, it's not that expensive, paying for dinner and a cab, but it's going to increase your bottom line. So if you're living on $500 a month, you're not really going to be dating very much. And frankly, at $1,000 a month up here, I'm not doing much of that kind of thing either. I'm pretty much just going out and coming home. So those are the reasons to not live on $500 a month. But basically, your ability to economize is going to depend on your familiarity with your adopted culture, the length of time you've been there, and to some extent the connections you make with the local people, because they can help introduce you to those things. So in the next episode, which I'm planning to film very shortly after this one, so it should come along within a week or so, is going to be called How Local Can You Go? And we're going to get back to some of the things that the people on the expat boards have kindly given me as feedback, and also some of my own experience, to talk about how the longer you get acclimated to a culture, the more time you put into it, the more you're going to achieve economies of living. And also, you're going to find that the things that you need to live and the things you get used to are going to change quite a bit. And it's a really interesting journey to go on. But for now, I want to thank you for watching this. I'm going to let these episodes be a little bit longer, because one of the things I've realized is that although there are not a ton of listeners or watchers to this show, a lot of you have emailed me and said it's quite important to you for some of the things that are going on in your lives. And it's very touching to me, and I will keep the show going regardless of whether we have 100 viewers or 1,000, because if it's going to help people, then I want to do it. I am sort of doing the YouTube channel for the time being full-time, because I can't really do anything else until Omicron passes. So if you want to become a patron for this channel, help keep the show going, help keep other shows and videos coming, there are links both to Patreon and to PayPal in the first comment. So, but don't feel any obligation at all, because I'm just happy you're here watching me do my thing, and I'm happy I get to talk to you. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you very shortly.